She has voiced support for shifting younger workers to private retirement accounts, an idea similar to what President George W. Bush proposed 6 years ago in his veiled effort to dismantle the program. Now the handlers have gotten to her. Suddenly she's saying, I want to save Medicare and Social Security. Well, I, for one, am glad she has seen the light, but I don't think my idea of saving Social Security and hers are probably aligned. In fact, Social Security does not need to be saved at all. Most Americans see through the deception, but I'm wary that many Americans, as much as they support Social Security, are questioning whether it will be there when they retire. This is a dangerous trend. Social Security needs to do more to educate Americans of the benefits and stability of Social Security. We need to debunk those nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terrors that are being perpetuated by those whose philosophy of economics doesn't take into account the unarguable success of Social Security. The fact is, Social Security is financially stable. There's a saying that if you repeat something often enough, it becomes the truth. Nothing better illustrates that point than the notion that Social Security will be bankrupted by the baby boomers. Would anyone disagree that you've heard people say that? I'm looking for a show of hands. I don't see any. Oh, you haven't heard people say that? Or you have heard people say that. Okay. Supposedly, it is the enormous bulge of retirees from this generation that will sink Social Security once and for all. Indeed, the generation of Americans born between 1946 and 1964, who drew their first retirement checks from Social Security in 2008, will place heavy demands upon the system as they reach their retirement years. But this is also a generation that has been paying into the system since they started working in the early 1960s. The critics of Social Security often forget, conveniently I think, about the pay-it-forward aspect of Social Security. They forget that Social Security is an insurance program where people need to contribute before they collect. The baby boomers have been contributing to Social Security for more than 40 years. It is their contributions that have built the massive surpluses that Social Security has amassed. Much of the money that the baby boomers are and will be drawing from Social Security is and will be their own. We've known about the impact of the baby boom generation for a long time. It isn't as if we woke up yesterday and discovered that there are millions of new retirees about to draw Social Security. The last of the baby boomers was born in 1964. And we've been planning for the impact of this generation for a long time. Congress has enacted 10 significant Social Security bills in the last 60 years. As Nancy Altman has also pointed out, every enactment has taken into account the baby boom, and each has left the program in long-run actuarial balance. In fact, the projected deficit of Social Security beginning in 2037 is not really as a result of the baby boomers. Forward-thinking Social Security Administration actuaries had already accounted for them. Instead, changes in the projected deficit have more to do with factors such as economic and wage growth, productivity, and disability rates. But these important parts of the story are usually left out. Instead, the purveyors of fear want you to believe that the baby boomers are retiring on the backs of their children and grandchildren. If you buy this premise, then they pull out their frightening statistics showing the declining number of contributors supporting a rising number of beneficiaries of Social Security to prove that the program is unsustainable. These utter distortions, however, are nothing new. My grandfather had to contend with them. In the 1936 presidential campaign, Alf Landon, the Republican nominee, labeled Social Security a hoax. In dismissing Social Security as unworkable, his platform that year stated that Social Security would be unable to pay benefits to 2/3 of retirees. My grandfather then would not be surprised to hear the fear-mongering of today. Instead, Social Security's critics have been casting the same aspersions on the program for 75 years. In the 1964 presidential campaign, Barry Goldwater asserted that Social Security promises more benefits to more people than the incomes collected will provide. During the same election, Ronald Reagan warned of Social Security's fiscal shortcomings and derided it as a welfare program. In 1980, the libertarian Cato Institute predicted that Social Security would go bankrupt in 2006. In the 2000 campaign, presidential candidate George W. Bush warned that it's going to be impossible to bridge the gap without causing huge payroll taxes or major benefit reductions. The interesting thing about all of these dire warnings of Social Security's demise is just how exaggerated they have been. Prognosticators of Social Security's impending doom are the political equivalent of television weathermen. The storms often peter out or don't turn out to be nearly as severe as predicted, despite the ones here recently in Washington that have been more severe than predicted. The difference, however, is that weathermen get most of their forecasts right and generally don't play fast and loose with the facts. Despite their poor track record, the mythology of fear surrounding Social Security has seeped into our collective conscience. Polls suggest that a majority of Americans don't expect to receive Social Security benefits when they retire. Now let's take a true measure of where we are. Social Security has not only been the most effective government program, it has been the most responsible government program. Social Security costs are funded out of its own dedicated revenue stream. It does not and cannot borrow money to finance its operations. There is no deficit financing. Social Security is the epitome of Yankee frugality. It could not be better managed. Social Security returns more than 99 cents to beneficiaries on every dollar collected. I dare you to find a private investment plan that can claim that. By the end of calendar year 2009, the Social Security Trust Fund had a positive balance of $2.54 trillion. Let me repeat, a $2.54 trillion surplus. It is estimated that Social Security revenues, including interest on the trust fund, will continue to exceed expenditures through 2024. As a result of interest earned on the trust fund balances, the trust fund surplus will continue to expand to approximately $4.3 trillion in 2003. After that year, it is projected that the balance in the Social Security Trust Fund will begin to decline. Still, reserves will be sufficient to pay full benefits through the year 2037. After 2037, Social Security would still be able to pay 76% of benefits. Now, since when is it news that a program is completely solvent for 27 years? If that's not bad news, it's not news at all in the way news is typically reported. Even in year 28 and thereafter, it could still fund 3/4 of anticipated benefits. This is decidedly not a program that is going broke. It's not a program that is broke, and it's not a program that won't be there when current contributors retire. In fact, what this is quite a remarkable achievement. I think if Americans really understood its true financial picture, those poll numbers suggesting people are not counting on Social Security would be reversed. Doubt would give way to confidence, fear to security. When Social Security celebrates its 100th anniversary, and I'd be willing to accept an invitation to speak on that occasion, August 2035, it will still have money in the bank. That's assuming we do absolutely nothing to make it even more secure. But why assume that we stand still? As the May 2010 report of the Senate Special Committee on Aging concluded, there are any number of small incremental measures that would keep Social Security solvent for the next 75 years. I won't actually commit now to speaking in 2085, but I'm confident you will find someone who will be as equally honored as I am to speak before you about the success and stability of Social Security. The point is, we don't have to make radical changes to the program to keep it working for future generations of Americans. That would be like overhauling a car engine when all we need to do is change the oil. We don't need to scrap a secure program of social insurance for a risky individual self-help scheme, as the slick salesmen of privatization keep trying to convince us. What are the policy equivalents of oil changes that will keep the program humming? The Senate Special Committee on Aging has considered a range of options, which alone or in combination can keep Social Security completely solvent into the next century. For example, increasing employee and employer contribution rates by 1.1% from the current 6.2 to 7.3 would eliminate the entire projected shortfall. That is, provide 100% of benefits after the year 2037 through 2085. We could eliminate the cap on wages subject to Social Security contributions. As you know, in 2010, only earnings up to $106,800 are subject to FICA. In creating the cap, Congress intended to cover 90% of the aggregate wages of all workers. Today, because wages have been increasing faster than the cap, especially for the top 5% of wage earners, FICA is assessed on only 83% of aggregate wages. If we eliminated the cap, even if we counted all the increased earnings toward benefits, we would eliminate an estimated 95% of the shortfall, and this change would impact only the top 6% of wage earners in this country. We might also consider expanding the base of workers covered by Social Security. Almost all workers pay into the system, with the exception of about 1/4 of state and municipal government employees who are covered by alternative pension systems. In my home state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, sometimes known as Red Sox Nation, for instance, almost 95% of state and local government workers do not pay into Social Security. If we extended Social Security to all newly hired state and local employees over the next 5 years, the Special Committee on Aging estimates that we would eliminate almost 10% of the projected deficit, while also eliminating another burden on state and local governments. Former Social Security Commissioner Robert Ball, whose reasoned voice is one that I dearly miss, and Nancy Altman, developed a plan that would keep Social Security running for at least another 3/4 of a century without cutting any benefits and not increasing the FICA rate for approximately 19 out of 20 American workers. Their plan would gradually raise the cap to cover 90% of aggregate wages, as Congress intended. Again, this change would only affect a small proportion of the American public, and if phased in over the next 20 to 30 years, would have no discernible financial effect even on them. Second, their proposal would restore a residual estate tax at 2009 levels and dedicate those revenues to the Social Security system. The estate tax would affect only individuals with estates of more than $3.5 million. Finally, they would allow Social Security gradually to invest some of its trust fund assets into equities to earn somewhat higher returns, just as other public and private pension plans do. While the private equity markets pose higher risks, the risk will not be borne by individuals as in the privatization schemes. Since Social Security will be around for quite some time, the risks are mitigated by it being spread over many more years. I'm not here to advocate for one solution or the other. What I'm here to say is that there are many smart people who have figured out how we can make modest changes to Social Security that will keep benefits flowing to millions of American families for decades to come. There are some ideas that I wholeheartedly oppose. First, I'm absolutely against any cut in payment levels. Social Security pays only modest amounts to begin with. The average benefit check is around $1,100. Cutting benefits would expose millions of Americans to financial distress, especially the 1/3 of elderly retirees who depend on Social Security for 90% or more of their total income. We should not contemplate raising the retirement age at which workers can elect benefits, as many are proposing,